Picture stepping into a sprawling metropolis of enormous palaces, towering domes, and grand halls. Millions pour into the streets just to witness it. The world's most famous architects designed these avenues to project power and permanence. Walking past these colossal columns and pristine facades, you would swear you were looking at an empire built to stand for centuries. But then, 6 months later, the gates close, the crowds go home, and this supposedly eternal city is systematically torn apart, collapsing back into dust. This is the strange, paradoxical reality of America's World's Fair architecture. Organizers spent fortunes constructing some of the nation's most impressive structural achievements, only to assign them strict expiration dates from the moment they were drawn up. So what actually happens when the reason for a masterpiece to exist disappears? And how does a building engineered for demolition manage to cheat its own death? In 1893, Chicago transformed a massive swath of its landscape into the world's Columbian Exposition. Visitors wandered through an enormous exhibition space packed with grand plazas and bridges, a dazzling spectacle that quickly became known as the White City. Architect Richard Morris Hunt anchored the space with the administration building. Its heavy, ornate central dome and imposing classical columns were designed to evoke deep historical permanence and absolute authority. But that permanence was an elaborate illusion. This entire grand capitol was essentially a massive, highly detailed stage set. Look closely beneath the surface. Builders achieved this monumental look using a material called staff, a cheap plaster-like mixture. They molded it over temporary wooden and steel skeletons to fake the heavy, solid appearance of carved stone. Because of this fragile construction, the outcome was inevitable. Once the exhibits were packed up and the fair closed, the physical illusion came to an end. The grand halls were rapidly dismantled or eventually demolished. Yet the White City evaded total erasure. Instead of surviving in physical space, it transformed into pure data. The Library of Congress preserved thousands of its official guides, detailed blueprints, and striking photographs. By abandoning its physical form entirely, the 1893 fair managed to cheat death. It exists today as a ghost, a completely reconstructible archive of a city that physically disappeared over a century ago. Some temporary buildings didn't quietly disappear into an archive when the crowds left. A few managed to survive in the real world long after they were meant to be gone. Jump forward 70 years to the 1964 New York World's Fair in Flushing Meadows. The classical domes of Chicago were gone, replaced by a booming, optimistic era of vibrant geometry. Architect Philip Johnson arrived with a design that pushed structural boundaries. He drew up the complex known as the New York State Pavilion. At the center of his design was the Tent of Tomorrow. It featured a massive, cable-suspended roof held aloft by 16 concrete columns. And like the Cluster Palaces of Chicago, it was fully expected to be temporary. Millions of people gathered on a massive terrazzo floor beneath a canopy of translucent, multicolored panels. The roof threw patterns of shifting geometric light over the crowds as they moved through the pavilion. But when the fair closed, the story stalled. The Tent of Tomorrow wasn't torn down, but it also wasn't designed for long-term upkeep. It struggled with the harsh reality of maintaining an aging framework, leaving it trapped in a slow state of decay. While the White City remains pristine in historical photographs, the pavilion's observation tower stubbornly stayed upright, rotting in plain sight against the Queen's skyline. The pavilion persisted as a physical artifact, outliving its intended lifespan to enter a decades-long struggle against its own expiration date. So we have two monumental designs built for temporary events. One vanished into filing cabinets, and the other rusted into the soil. Yet look at where they stand today. Despite decades of visible ruin, the New York State Pavilion is now fiercely protected. It is recognized as a critical feat of modern engineering and holds a spot on the National Register of Historic Places. Meanwhile, the Chicago Fair remains entirely absent from the physical world, yet its design remains a primary reference point for the development of American city planning. This diagram shows the paradox of temporary architecture. A building might only exist physically for a few fleeting months, represented by that tiny block on the timeline, while its cultural legacy expands outward indefinitely. Its physical lifespan does not dictate its historical impact. Architecture doesn't actually need to stand forever to leave a mark. Even when the plaster crumbles and the steel rots away, the ideas built inside them remain permanent.